Rosewood Hills is a suburb that is so peaceful that it could lull you into a sense of safety. The town's tree-lined streets were home to families who greeted each other warmly each morning, a place where front porch conversations lasted hours. But in the Carter household, behind those pristine windows, secrets festered that no one in the neighborhood could have anticipated. Tonight, we're pulling back the curtain on a story that shocked this community to its core. This is the story of Regina Carter, a dedicated teacher with a passion for literature, and Malcolm Carter, her teenage stepson. Their hidden relationship wasn't just scandalous, it was catastrophic. From whispers in the hallways to devastating betrayal, what followed was a tragedy that shattered lives and left a scar on Rosewood Hills forever. Stay with us as we unravel the layers of this shocking case. You won't believe the twists we uncover. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments below. Regina Carter was the kind of teacher students didn't just learn from, they admired her. Her charisma and ability to connect with everyone made her a standout figure at Rosewood Hills High. Parents trusted her, colleagues respected her, and students flocked to her classroom, eager to be challenged and inspired. At 38, Regina had what many considered the perfect life. Just months earlier, she had married Harold Carter, a successful entrepreneur who owned a chain of hardware stores. Harold was a man who loved to entertain and seemed to thrive in the spotlight, always the life of every community gathering. Together, Regina and Harold were considered a power couple, their blended family a testament to modern love. Then there was Malcolm Carter. At 15, Malcolm was the antithesis of his father. Where Harold was outgoing and bold, Malcolm was quiet and introspective. He was often found sketching in his notebook, drawing vivid portraits that hinted at an artistic soul. Some said Malcolm was too withdrawn, but his teachers chalked it up to the loss of his mother years ago. Harold rarely spoke of Malcolm's late mother, but her presence lingered in the Carter home, a silent memory that only Malcolm seemed to acknowledge. Malcolm kept to himself at school, his reserved demeanor making him fade into the background. But Regina saw something different in Malcolm, a depth that others seemed to overlook. The setting for this drama, Rosewood Hills, was a picture-perfect suburb outside Atlanta. The community prided itself on its well-maintained lawns, neighborhood potlucks, and an air of familiarity among its residents. It was the kind of place where kids played freely in the streets and parents watched out for each other's children. On the surface, Rosewood Hills seemed immune to the chaos of the outside world. Yet, behind the manicured hedges and the warm greetings, it was also a place where secrets could easily go unnoticed. Little did the residents know, the Carter household was hiding one of the most shocking secrets their town had ever seen. To the outside world, the Carters were thriving. Harold's business was booming, Regina's reputation as a teacher only grew, and Malcolm was just another teenager navigating his way to adulthood. But this fragile balance was about to crack in ways no one could have foreseen. What began as small, seemingly innocent moments would soon escalate into a chain of events that would leave the town of Rosewood Hills forever changed. The story of the Carter family is one of ambition, secrecy, and a descent into unthinkable violence. It began on a sweltering July evening. Harold Carter returned home from work, his shirt damp with sweat from the unrelenting summer heat. But the warmth in the air couldn't mask the coldness he felt when he stepped inside. Regina greeted him briefly, avoiding his eyes and disappearing into the bedroom without another word. Harold paused, glancing toward the dining table where Malcolm sat, his phone clutched tightly in his hand. The boy's nervous energy filled the room as he repeatedly glanced at the device, his fingers tapping rhythmically on the table. Days turned into weeks, and Harold began noticing changes in the household. Regina's once lively conversations were now reduced to distracted nods. Malcolm, usually reserved, seemed restless, pacing the house late at night. Then, one evening, the unease reached its peak. Harold came home to find Regina and Malcolm seated together at the dining table. Their conversation stopped abruptly as he entered, their expressions unreadable. Harold's suspicion was growing, though he couldn't yet put his finger on what was wrong. 2 weeks later, Harold Carter vanished. On the night of his disappearance, neighbors reported hearing raised voices coming from the Carter residence. Some described the sounds as heated, almost desperate, but no one intervened. Around midnight, Malcolm was seen leaving the house. One neighbor claimed to have spotted him carrying a large duffel bag. The sight was odd enough to raise questions, but no one could have anticipated its significance at the time. When Harold failed to show up at work the next morning, his colleagues were immediately concerned. Harold was punctual to a fault and never missed a meeting. When his phone went unanswered, they called Regina. Calmly, she explained that Harold had left town for a sudden business trip. Yet something didn't add up. Harold's co-workers knew there had been no scheduled trips and no planned absences. The explanation seemed too convenient, raising red flags. Questions began to swirl as the hours turned into days. Where was Harold? Why hadn't he told anyone about this alleged trip? And why did Regina seem so unconcerned? As investigators began to dig into Harold's life, the facade of the Carter family's perfect existence began to crumble, revealing the first cracks in a dark and shocking reality. When Harold's co-workers reported him missing, the Rosewood Hills Police Department wasted no time. This wasn't just an ordinary no-show. Harold was a man of routine, a businessman with a reputation for reliability. Something was wrong, and the urgency was palpable. Officers visited the Carter home to gather details, but what they encountered raised more questions than answers. Regina met them at the door, composed but strangely detached. She answered their questions with polite brevity, explaining that Harold had left for an unscheduled business trip and hadn't informed her of his destination. Her calmness struck the officers as peculiar, given the circumstances, and when pressed about Harold's recent behavior or their relationship, her answers became increasingly vague. Meanwhile, investigators began their work. Harold's car was discovered just 2 miles from the Carter home, parked near the entrance to a dense wooded area. Inside, they found his phone and wallet, items he would never leave behind. This wasn't just unusual, it was alarming. Nearby, officers made another grim discovery, a blood-stained tarp, partially hidden beneath a pile of leaves. The scene was unsettling, but without a body, they couldn't draw definitive conclusions. As the search expanded, more pieces of the puzzle began to emerge. Security footage from a nearby gas station became a crucial lead. The grainy video showed Malcolm Carter entering the store late on the night of Harold's disappearance. In his hands were several items: bleach, gloves, and heavy-duty garbage bags. The timestamp placed him there just an hour after neighbors reported hearing loud voices coming from the Carter home. Investigators were now looking at Malcolm as a person of interest, but they needed more. Back at the Carter residence, the police conducted a thorough search. What they found raised even more red flags. In the garage, they uncovered traces of blood on the floor, hastily cleaned but still visible under forensic light. There were also scratches on the walls as if something heavy had been dragged through the space. Regina, when questioned about the findings, claimed ignorance. Her demeanor, once calm and cooperative, now showed cracks. She grew defensive, her answers curt and unconvincing. Detectives also began piecing together accounts from neighbors. One neighbor recalled seeing Malcolm leaving the house late that night, carrying what looked like a large dark bag. Another mentioned hearing loud noises, thumps and muffled voices, before everything went eerily quiet. The accounts painted a disturbing picture, but the most shocking revelation came from Malcolm's classmates. One student came forward with text messages that Malcolm had sent the night Harold vanished. In them, he hinted at a secret he was struggling to keep, one that he said could destroy everything. As the investigation deepened, attention shifted back to Regina. Her phone records revealed a pattern of late-night calls and messages to Malcolm, some sent mere hours before Harold disappeared. The content of these messages was heavily redacted by investigators, but the timing alone was suspicious. Detectives began to question the nature of Regina and Malcolm's relationship, and whispers of an inappropriate connection spread through the community. Regina denied any wrongdoing, insisting that her bond with Malcolm was nothing more than a motherly concern for a troubled teenager, but the evidence suggested otherwise. The pressure on the Carter family was mounting, and the town of Rosewood Hills watched with bated breath. What had started as a missing person case was rapidly evolving into something far more complex and far more disturbing. The pieces of the puzzle were coming together, but the picture they painted was one of betrayal, deception, and an unspeakable act that would leave the community forever changed. Just when the investigation seemed to be hitting a wall, a former co-worker of Regina stepped forward with a revelation that turned the case on its head. According to the co-worker, Regina had confided in her weeks before Harold's disappearance. The shocking admission? She was pregnant, and the baby wasn't Harold's. The co-worker revealed that Regina had admitted to an affair with none other than her stepson, Malcolm. This explosive revelation sent shockwaves through the investigation and the town. The police obtained a court order for DNA testing which confirmed the co-worker's claim. Malcolm was the father of Regina's unborn child. The revelation obliterated any remaining facade of normalcy in the Carter household. Investigators now had more than just suspicion. They had a motive, and it was as damning as it was shocking. With this new information, detectives intensified their focus on Regina and Malcolm. Neighbors who had initially been hesitant to speak now came forward with stories of heated arguments between Regina and Malcolm in the days leading up to Harold's disappearance. One neighbor even claimed to have overheard Regina telling Malcolm, "We have to do something about him," during a late-night argument. A critical breakthrough came when forensic analysis linked Malcolm to the blood-stained tarp found near Harold's abandoned car. His fingerprints were discovered on the edges of the tarp, as well as on a roll of duct tape recovered from the Carter garage. This was no longer a case of circumstantial evidence. The pieces were falling into place, and they painted a harrowing picture of what had transpired the night Harold vanished. As the investigation deepened, more unsettling details emerged. Text messages retrieved from Regina's phone revealed a string of conversations with Malcolm that grew increasingly desperate and erratic in the days leading up to Harold's disappearance. In one message, Regina wrote, "We can't let him ruin this for us." Another read, "It has to be tonight." The messages left little doubt that Regina and Malcolm had been plotting something, but what exactly had happened remained unclear. The revelation sent shockwaves through Rosewood Hills, as the picture of the Carter family's private life came into sharp and disturbing focus. What had once appeared to be a tragic case of a missing man was now shaping up to be something far more calculated, driven by forbidden relationships and desperate decisions. But the biggest question remained: where was Harold, and would the investigation uncover the full truth before it was too late? After weeks of relentless investigation, the case reached a dramatic turning point. Malcolm Carter, under intense pressure and mounting evidence, broke down during a late-night interrogation. His confession sent shockwaves through the precinct and the town of Rosewood Hills. Malcolm admitted to being involved in Harold's disappearance, but claimed it was an act of self-defense. According to Malcolm, a confrontation with Harold had escalated into violence when Harold allegedly discovered the affair and threatened to expose them both. In his words, he had no choice. But the detectives weren't convinced. Malcolm's version of events didn't align with the physical evidence. The blood-stained tarp, the traces of cleaning supplies in the garage, and the damning text messages painted a far more calculated picture. Investigators believed that Malcolm and Regina had planned Harold's murder to keep their affair and pregnancy hidden from the world. Malcolm's confession was just the beginning of a legal battle that would captivate the nation. Regina, when confronted with Malcolm's confession, vehemently denied any involvement. She portrayed herself as a victim of circumstance, a mother trying to protect her troubled stepson. But the jury didn't buy it. The text messages, the timeline, and the eyewitness accounts were too compelling to ignore. Regina Carter was convicted of conspiracy to commit murder and sentenced to 25 years in prison. Malcolm, the confessed killer, was convicted of first-degree murder and received a life sentence without the possibility of parole. The courtroom was a circus of emotion during the trial. Friends and neighbors who once admired Regina watched in disbelief as the woman they thought they knew was exposed as a calculating manipulator. Malcolm's classmates described him as a quiet boy turned into someone unrecognizable. The revelations shattered the illusion of the Carter family, leaving the community grappling with the horror that had unfolded in their midst. The resolution of the case brought a semblance of closure, but the scars left behind would never fully heal. Rosewood Hills was a town forever changed by the events that had unraveled over those harrowing weeks. Harold Carter's family and friends mourned a man whose life was cut tragically short by betrayal and greed. Meanwhile, the story of Regina and Malcolm became a grim cautionary tale about how lies and forbidden desires can lead to unthinkable consequences. For the residents of Rosewood Hills, the Carter house stands as a haunting reminder of the darkness that can lurk behind closed doors. To this day, neighbors still whisper about the night Harold vanished and the scandal that tore their quiet suburb apart. What do you think? Could this tragedy have been prevented? Or were Regina and Malcolm destined to unravel the way they did? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And as always, remember to like, subscribe, and stay tuned for more stories that remind us of the fragile line between the ordinary and the unthinkable. Stay safe, stay curious, and we'll see you next time. The case of Regina and Malcolm Carter is a chilling example of how fragile trust can be and how devastating the consequences of betrayal and forbidden secrets can become. It's a story that reminds us all of the darkness that can unfold when love and obsession blur the lines of morality. Harold Carter's life ended tragically, and the fallout of that night forever changed not just one family, but an entire community. Now we want to hear from you. Do you think Regina was the mastermind behind it all, pulling the strings while Malcolm fell under her influence? Or was their relationship a tangled web of mutual decisions that spiraled out of control? Let us know your thoughts and theories in the comments below. We read every single one. If you found this case as gripping as we did, make sure to like this video, share it with your friends, and subscribe to our channel for more true crime stories that leave you questioning everything you thought you knew. And don't forget to hit that notification bell so you'll be the first to know when our next case drops. Thank you for watching and joining us as we uncovered the unsettling layers of this case. Stay curious, stay safe, and remember, sometimes the truth is stranger than fiction. We'll see you next time for another journey into the mysteries of the human psyche.